Okay, everybody, let's begin this morning's session. As a reminder, my name is Rob Hack. I'm representing the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. You can get more information about us on hawaiiexportsupport.com. We are a local nonprofit working with the U.S. Commerce Department on helping companies in Hawaii and the Pacific region export. That's primarily to Asia just because of our geography, but it doesn't have to be. We certainly help companies export to Canada and Mexico and Europe and South America and what have you. Today's seminar is on legal issues for exporters. We have seminars on various topics that exporters need, such as finance and marketing. We have an excellent program coming up that's specifically on the Tokyo International Gift Show. That will be June 28th. So please look at the DBET website or our website at hawaiiexportsupport.com, and you can find out how to sign up for that and attend in person or online. Let me briefly go over a quick disclaimer that this seminar today is being recorded. So any comments or questions you ask will be recorded and put onto the DBET website as well as the HPEC YouTube channel. So please know that in advance. We are able to put on these series of seminars because of a generous grant from DBET. And with that, I would like to bring up Jamie Lum from DBET to say a few words about the High Step program and how companies in Hawaii can learn from these programs, but also apply for funding. Please.
Aloha, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. As Rob said, I am with DBED. DBED is the administrator of a grant that actually comes from the Small Business Administration for a program called STEP, or the State Trade Expansion Program. It is a competitive grant with other states. We do work in partnership with organizations like HPEC and like the Small Business Development Centers, as well as High Tech Development Corporation and the FTZ here, Hawaii Department of Agriculture. And the whole purpose of the STEP program is to help increase U.S. exports overall. So for Hawaii, that means we want to see more companies either begin to export, or for those that might already be exporting, to look at ways to be able to expand in the markets that they're in or into new markets. So with the funds that we have, we basically have put together a program that has three components. And the first is export training, or export readiness, as we call it. And this seminar here, as well as the series of seminars that HPEC has been putting together, is part of that. Companies that can also receive, besides attending these training seminars, which, by the way, are videotaped, and you can always see it on our website, which is invest.hawaii.gov, or on the HPEC YouTube. And the materials are there as well. But in addition to training, we also, working with our partners, HPEC, Small Business Development Center, help companies by offering some counseling and mentoring in putting together export plans. And that's important because with your export plan, you can then move into the other two elements of our program, which are our Hawaii pavilions. DBED has designated certain shows in which we will go and purchase space, and then we recruit companies and we go in together as the Hawaii Pavilion, and we each company individually will promote themselves, but we're all under the umbrella of the Hawaii brand. So that's one element of our program, Hawaii Pavilions. The funds, the STEP funds, are used to pay for all of the pavilion expenses. So companies pay for their own airfare and hotel, and they pay a small participation fee, but it's more reasonable cost for companies besides than if they were to go into the show standing alone as the, just on the company's dime. So that's one element. The other element, the third element of the program is our financial assistance program. For 2017, we have actually awarded all of the funds. I have had questions about next year. We are actually waiting for SBA to put out the next program announcement for funding, and we anticipate that that will be early next month. And so we're hopeful, again, I said it's competitive. It's not a guarantee that we'll get money, but we're hopeful that with the program that we've been running for the last couple of years, that SBA sees that we've been doing a good job with the money and that companies have been benefiting from it and will get another award. And so we would anticipate that we would again have funding for assistance to help companies implement their export plan that they put together by attending seminars such as this or working with our partners. So that's basically an overview, quick overview of our High Step program. And if you have any questions or you want to see more about what we're doing, we still are recruiting for some of the Hawaii pavilions that are coming up. In Japan, we're doing Hankyu and Hikarie in July, and the Tokyo Gift Show, as Rob mentioned, we're doing a special session on that because we have so many companies going in. It's such a large show. That's in September, as well as a show called The Outdoor Retailer at the end of July. So if you go to invest.hawaii.gov, under the exporting tab, you'll be able to find all the information on the High Step program. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Great. Now that leads us to our speaker of the day, no pun intended, is David Day. He's a well-known and highly regarded attorney here in Honolulu. He's on the board of directors of the Hawaii Pacific Export Council with me, and we greatly appreciate the work he does there. He's spoken at our events several times in the past. He has a vast amount of international legal experience and is really the perfect speaker for this type of event. So we'd like to thank David for being here. I'll turn the microphone over to him, but please, I would suggest let's leave the questions until the very end. And we usually get questions from the online audience as well. And then after the fact, if you'd like to hang out and talk to David one-on-one, we usually have a little space in the back there. So with that, thank you again, and I'd like to turn it over to David Day, Esquire.
Thank you, and good morning. Please don't let the title of this seminar be intimidating, okay? Probably it should be something like, let's not do something stupid, or you idiot, comma, something like that. And also, you know, a lot of times when you hear about a program that some lawyer is going to do, it's all about don't do this, don't do that, you know, slap on the hand type stuff, you know, you can't do this. And so a piece of this is going to relate to making money for your respective businesses. And so let me just take a moment and explain how we put this, a more advanced program together so it'll make some sense for you. What we're going to do is make the assumption that maybe you have already done the initial legal setup for your business. And if you haven't done that, that's a matter of getting on the DCCA website and going through the initial registration process. Let me warn you, a lot of people think if they just set up with DCCA, they've got a corporation or they've got an LLC. They don't. They've done the initial paperwork. And there's a need to have a series of legal documents, an organizational meeting, and so forth and so on to really put the package together so that you've got some liability protection in case something goes wrong. But the first thing that we're going to be talking about is getting your intellectual property all set. And the reason I want to talk about that first is that's another asset, moneymaker for your business that perhaps you really haven't thought of. And so you have to think about intellectual property as if you have an opportunity to build a separate piece of real estate, as an example, that you can sell off. And if you don't believe me, think about Famous Amos chocolate chip cookies. How many times has he sold the name Famous Amos or Famous Amos chocolate chip, and then he goes back and makes a different cookie recipe and does it again? And so what he's doing is, Wally's cookies or something like that, he over the last 20 years, he's basically used the chocolate chip cookie or a cookie recipe and built intellectual property, if you will, condominium towers and sold them off. So it's an asset that you can build, and unless you have a business that you're going to do everything in a plain brown wrapper with handwritten addresses, you have some intellectual property that you can develop. So that's a moneymaker. So we're going to talk about that. The next thing we're going to talk about is how are you going to put this deal together? You're going to cross an international border. You're perhaps going to work with some people you don't really know. And what are some negotiating tips? Because a lot of times that's where your deal will fall out right there. You can't put together the deal. And again, that's a moneymaker. It's a big moneymaker for you. And if you do it right, you'd be surprised how well you can negotiate. You'd be really surprised. I won't get into the art of the deal too much. We won't talk about how to handle the North Koreans. But in terms of commercial stuff, I think I can give you some really good tips. And then if you want to talk with me privately about the North Koreans, we'll do that later. Okay? Then there are some contract mistakes that are made frequently. And there's a couple of important tips that I want to give you. We see this frequently as lawyers. Whenever you have a deal that crosses an international border, there's a couple key things that you better know about. And the reason I say you better know about is because your lawyer might not. And so as the executive that's controlling what's being done for your business or your company, you need to make sure this couple of these little pieces are in that contract. And then finally, the reality of life in the Asia-Pacific region and truly globally is you are going to encounter corruption, requests for a bribe. And the issue is, what are you going to do? What are the problems? What is your exposure? And so through years of mistakes, I've got some really interesting techniques I want to give you if that comes up, but more properly when it comes up, because it will be there. And having said that, don't for 1 minute believe that we do not have corruption in Hawaii or in the United States. In fact, when I leave here today, one of my colleagues is giving a talk down at the Ala Moana Hotel on the Yakuza. Don't for 1 minute sit there and think that the Yakuza is not here in the United States. They are here, as well as other organized crime. And so the corruption issue, don't feel that I am, think that I'm living in a glass house and throwing stones, because it's all around us. It's just that it'll be perhaps more pervasive when you do business out in the Asia-Pacific region, and you'll have to deal with some criminal liability that exists, and you will be watched by the Justice Department. So, having said that as an introduction, let's go to the second slide now and talking about the intellectual property. And you see up there patent law, trademark, and copyright. And so, contrary to most speakers, I'm going to start from the bottom of the slide and talk up, just to keep you awake. And I know we haven't had a second cup of coffee yet. So, and the reason I want to talk about copyrights is that's perhaps the fastest, easiest piece of intellectual property that you can develop. And I want to use, for all of these, let's go back to that slide, we'll stay right there. I want to use for all of these the example of Coca-Cola, so you can visualize this, okay? So in a copyright situation, that's a creation by a written or literary work by an artist. And so it could be software, could be you writing an advertisement. And so in a Coca-Cola situation, just imagine a magazine ad that's prepared to advertise Coke or Coca-Cola. all right? And so the copyright is a very easy application that's filed with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And it gets all set. It's a very inexpensive process, and you should be doing that. The second one up there is the trademark. And so if we go back to the Coca-Cola example, the mark is the design, it could be a design mark or a name that's used and shipped across state borders. Used in interstate commerce is how you start it. You can get federal protection. Now back up a second. You all, I hope, have filed with DCCA and you got your business set up. And you started the first piece of a trademark when you selected a name or a DBA, doing business as, for your business. So the mark might be combined with a logo. All right, let's go back to the Coca-Cola example. You know, if you took a Coke can or bottle, I'm going to use the old-fashioned glass bottle as an example, but you know the script-written Coca-Cola with the underscore, remember that? It's a very distinct mark. And that mark can be filed in the state of Hawaii, but you want federal trademark protection because that's how you get inexpensive international protection later on. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. Why are we talking about intellectual property now? It's because it's a business asset that you can develop, go back to Wally Amos, and sell it off if you need to. It's your opportunity to build a condominium tower on the side of your business. Everybody understand that because it's important. Okay, now, the patent situation, if we go back, that's maybe an invention, a process of some kind. And in the Coca-Cola situation, let me give you two examples. The first one is the classic patent would be the bottling machines. The bottling machines that are used to put the various component pieces of the drink in there. The sugar, the water, the flavoring, the way the bottling system is designed. Now, a patent, when it's filed, it becomes essentially public property subject to licensing. And there are a lot of reasons why you might not want to make your process public, your invention public. Why is that? Because in some countries, they don't have really good patent enforcement and they might steal it. Example, let's go back to Coca-Cola. The Coca-Cola formula has never been patented. Never been patented in all these years. It's kept as a trade secret. They don't disclose it. And there may be reasons why your process, your invention, and so forth, that you want to keep it as a trade secret, and you're going to have to protect it, you know. Keep it so that there are just a handful of people that know. That's very useful in some countries. Now, let's go to the next slide here. Back up. Not there yet. Let me talk very quickly about once you've done the registration for the three kinds of intellectual property that you register. That is the patent. Now, patents in Hawaii we don't see too often, but I mention it just so you know about it. And there are very few patent lawyers in the state of Hawaii. That's just not something that we see too often. Trademarks and copyrights, yes. But let's say you do the registration in the United States, you're doing business or you're planning to export, and you've got to do what Apple failed to do in China. Register the trademark internationally. And if you look it up, you'll see Apple had some serious problems with its trademark, and I can't recall whether it was the Apple symbol or the trademark associated with the iPhone name, but they ran into a real jam there. So you got to do the international piece of it. And as potential exporters, there are some advantages that here, and so let me just run down them real quick. The first one is for copyrights, is the Berne Convention. And under the Berne Convention, basically, once you get your U.S. copyright, many countries in the world will recognize that, and it's enforced globally. So that's sort of a one-stop shop, easy for you to do, don't worry about it. The second one is called the Madrid Protocol, and that's for trademarks. And that is a process where you're filing the mark with the United States government as a federal trademark, and then you can pick up a series of countries who've signed on to this protocol. And in the Asia-Pacific region, the key ones of all belong to that, but for Taiwan. And North Korea. But there's some separate registrations that you can do for Taiwan, so don't worry about that one. But the Madrid Protocol is not something that happens automatically. You have to select and apply for the countries that you want. And then in the patent area, I'll just mention there are two. There's a Paris Convention that's like 100 years old that allows for international registration of patents. You have to do it within about a year after you get your federal patent is approved. You have to go and apply to separate countries, and it's a very expensive process. And then there's a patent cooperation treaty under the World Intellectual Property Organization, you can designate which countries you want the patent to apply to when you do your federal application under that. And the interesting thing with the patent cooperation treaty is it expands to another 18 months, so you got like 30 months to get your various countries' applications in. Now, let's go to the next slide here. But all of you see the basic legal framework that's used to set up your intellectual property. Important. The critical ones that you'll need will be the copyright and the trademark. Trademark, you gotta use it in interstate commerce. So what I recommend that you do is the first time you're going to use your trademark is you have the trademark, take your phone, photograph the package that it's being used in, and then the recipient photograph it on the other end with the postage stamp so you can prove the date and that it moved in interstate commerce and you're set to go. All right? Now, in the area of negotiation, you have to think now that you are moving into a different culture, and the way that they handle language and different sensitivities in terms of body communication, physical communication will be totally different. And so these are some of the issues that you're going to face. And the first one that I put at the top is the most important one. And that is the issue of gifts and favors. And entertainment there is in little bigger letters. And the reason is, in our region of the world, we have the concept of the global omiyagi. And that means you're taking gifts, they're giving gifts, and just be careful when you're starting out. Let's get the gifts appropriate for what you're doing business-wise. It looks dangerous if you start handing out, free condominiums or an opportunity for entrance to Harvard, or I'm going to pay your kids' tuition to medical school, that kind of stuff. Stay away from that, okay? And the reason I mention that is that it's been asked of me several times if I would handle those things just as a favor to get the deal. The entertainment piece is very important. And in very intensive trainings for MBA and executive MBAs throughout the region, one of the things on entertainment that we have required is the karaoke training. And you laugh. Karaoke training works like this. I'll just explain it, and then maybe you'll understand how significant it is. Karaoke training means that the next class that you come, you're required to come up here and stand in front. I get to go sit down. You don't get any musical accompaniment, no words, a cappella, and happy birthday doesn't count. No Christmas carols. Have at it. Sing, I left my heart in San Francisco to your heart's content. Just get that couple of 3 songs down so you can do it. Because if you've had the experience of going to a country and you're not used to singing, I promise you it will be a terrifying event when you have all these eyes looking at you as the foreign visitor, and they've already sung in Korean and English, and you can't even hack out happy birthday in front of this group. So this is what I call karaoke training. I'm not going to require those of you who are watching online to stand up and do this. We will be doing this at a break in this class here, but you won't get to see that. Just kidding. All right, boy, this is a serious group here this morning. I guess we have more coffee in the back, and if you want to pick that up, my goodness. We'll talk about corruption later on. Gender roles, let me talk about the role of the American woman doing business in the Asia-Pacific region. These gender roles are changing greatly. They're not quite what you might expect. Let me use changes in Japan coming a little slower, but they're coming. We're seeing more Japanese women in business now in executive positions, and so don't be surprised if you run across if you're doing a deal in Japan and you do have a woman on the other side of the table negotiating with you. They are, referring to the Japanese woman, probably far more experienced than you will be in the area of entertainment, karaoke, and serious drinking. And I'm not suggesting that ladies start training for that, just be prepared. In Korea, I think the situation is coming along the same way, perhaps a little bit more advanced than Japan, but again, both of those are heavily male-dominated societies. However, typically, they've done enough business with American women so that the situation is such that they're a little bit more comfortable than they were, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago. Vietnam, totally the opposite. I've seen a couple Wall Street Journal articles that in Vietnam, there are more, as a percentage, women executives in senior corporate and government positions in Vietnam than in the United States. And that has to do with the role of the Vietnamese woman in society, which is totally different than every country in the world, including Israel and China. And that role has been the senior military leadership in Vietnam has been female that goes back literally 2,000 years. So as an example for that, there are 2 major streets in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City named Hai Ba Chung. It means the 2 Chung sisters, and if you go back in history, you'll see that they were major lady generals riding on elephant, driving the Chinese out of Vietnam. And so that history comes forward from about 200 AD all the way through the Vietnam War. And so the role of the Vietnamese woman, just remember if you're doing a deal in Vietnam, she gets to sit at the table not by way of rule of law, as the American woman does. The Vietnamese woman sits there at the negotiating table by way of blood. She's earned the right to be there because Vietnamese women throughout their history have been involved in their military. Okay. A couple other things about dress. This you'll have to pay very careful attention to in Malaysia and Indonesia, in the Muslim countries, Muslim majority countries rather. And I always encourage 2 things for all of us, men and women, is let's not do the full-on Waikiki wear when we do business in foreign countries, because they don't understand that the aloha shirt is not kosher. And the aloha shirt conveys to them, we're on holiday vacation, and how come you're not wearing rubber slippers? Kind of kind of attitude. So for gentlemen, I suggest look at the way that their business people are dressing and try to dress just slightly one up from them. In other words, in Singapore, you'll see many of the men wearing a long sleeve shirt and a tie. And so one-upsmanship from that, guess what? Coat. You can take the coat off, but you wear it initially. And ladies, the best advice I can give you is to dress conservative business wear. And certainly in the Muslim majority countries, be prepared to carry a scarf with you. You will probably need that, and it would be appreciated. Bare arms, shoulders, it's not a good idea. Dress is important because you don't want somebody focusing on the way that you're dressed inappropriately or not. You want them focused on the business deal. And so getting the right dress is appropriate. And I include with dress, as a part of dress, your business cards. Make sure that you've got those. If you were to come to my office and look in one of my cabinets, my partner Elizabeth, who's here, she could show you. I've got business cards in all the major languages in the Asia Pacific region on the back of every one of my business cards. Yes, even for North Korea. It's in Korean, but okay. I'm going to make too many North Korean jokes today, and you're going to have to get some of them. But I hope you realize that. No offense to the little fat boy. Okay. Now, business manners and methods. Let me talk about how to get these pieces all in place real easy. You see this long list? There is a book called Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands. You can pick it up from Amazon. Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands. And the way that this book works is all of these topics for about 140 countries are carried in roughly 20-page chapters in this book. And so if you will own this book, and before you go to, as example, Cambodia, first time to Cambodia, what you do is you scan in or copy the pages in that book that relate to Cambodia just before you go out the door to the airport. They will have all of these topics covered for Cambodia, as an example, in those 20 pages. And then you get on the plane right after the plane takes off from the Reef runway. And for those of you on Maui, you take off from Kahului or wherever, you can read through these 20 pages as they're serving you dinner, and you will know more about doing business in Cambodia with its history, its politics, and so forth by the time you get to the main course of your meal, and you'll be far ahead of most business people when they land in Phnom Penh. Trust me. So that's how I suggest that you address these general topics and more having to do with the history, the political situation, and so forth, geopolitics, how it all fits together for a given country. Okay, let's try another slide here, see what we got. Okay, now, here's the thing. Let's go back to entertainment. The reason that entertainment is so important is that's how this concept of business bonding starts. And that's also how the reason for the exchange of gifts. It's a way of starting to build trust. And the reason that trust becomes so important that you build it is in most other countries in the world, there are a few exceptions, and in our region, the one exception that comes to mind is Singapore. They do not have a safety net, under the law of this, a rule of law like a safety net in case something goes wrong in the transaction. They're relying on trust. Yes, there's a contract. Yes, there are courts. But the truth of the matter is, if something goes wrong, they're really relying on the business relationship that has been built, the trust factor. And the way they start that are things like entertainment, gifts, and so forth. You just have to watch that the obligations that come out of that don't cross the line. And the line is a gray area. You know, it's one thing to give somebody a golf club, it's another one to give them a golf membership to a club. You understand the difference? Several $1,000s or tens of thousands. And understand that in our culture, the American culture, and the Singaporeans have learned it from the British, and to some extent we see this in Hong Kong, that in the Western cultures, the contract is like a snapshot with your iPhone of the future, and you then reduce it all to writing. If this happens, then we go to the left. If this happens, then we go to the right. And in countries that aren't built with this kind of words culture, they are relying on the trust. That's how you get a situation that I had one time in my career where we had this Taiwanese client that this is back when Boeing was building 747-400s, and we went up to Seattle to buy a Boeing 747, and the client had a little 4-page contract, and the poor lawyers from Boeing almost passed out because they'd never seen a contract that short. You know, you're going to buy a 747, you got this stack of documents that looks like a phone book. Okay, let's go to the next slide here. So this is important, and so in this concept of negotiation, if you visualize what you're doing, is that you have to deal with the iceberg. And so what's the most dangerous part of the iceberg? Yeah, collision, partial credit. Okay, but the most dangerous part is what you cannot see, right? In the case of the Titanic, I'm not sure if they could actually see it, if it would have made any difference, but it's the part that's below the water, below the surface. The same thing with negotiating a deal. So let's show you what's above the surface first here. This is what you can see. And as an example, in the real estate business, you see this with the positions that are in what the document called the DROAs that are exchanged between the parties. This is what they say, okay? The offer, the counter offer, the counter to the counter offer, the counter to the counter to the, okay? They're exchanged, and you can see that. But let's look at some of the things that are below the surface now. So here's one. What's their secret? What do they really want? Is it the money, or they want an apology? And those kinds of things in a negotiation, people do not lay that out. They keep it close. They usually don't disclose that. And so your job as a negotiator is to find out what are the hidden interests. Because maybe I don't have to pay that much. Maybe I can pay half and provide an apology for lousy service. You see what I'm saying? Hey, think for a moment about United Airlines. They're starting to have to deal with some of the hidden interests here, and they started with the cheap one, the apology, right? Then the next one they're having to do is they remitted some fares. Watch the level of the apology over the next several years that United Airlines is going to go through, because they're going to have to claw back their reputation, and that's going to involve, I think, over billions of dollars. It's an incredible clawback that United is going to have to. It will probably end up with additional legroom, free baggage, and then as soon as United does it, Hawaiian is going to have to copy. So there are all kinds of changes that are going to come from that. And some of these interests are hidden. Okay, now your job is to be, when you're negotiating a deal, you have to think of yourself as, okay, I am my own intelligence operation, and I got to find out what those hidden interests are. And I'll explain how to do that in a minute, but I want you to understand some of these other items, issues that are below the surface. So let's try another one here. Okay, so we talked about offers and counter offers up at the top. See that? That's the exchange. That's what they're saying on the surface. Okay, let's try another one. Oh my goodness, language problems. Look, you've had the experience here in Hawaii, and you know that just because somebody speaks English doesn't mean they understand it. And just because they speak something that sounds like English doesn't mean you understand it. And so there are all kinds of language problems, and you may not have the luxury of operating in English. So now you got a translator problem. Let's try another one here. Ooh, cultural misunderstandings. I showed up in Jakarta right on the eve of Ramadan. What a waste. Can you believe this? After Christmas, we're ready to start business again in the United States. We've done our holidays. You got a couple weeks you want to get set, and you show up in Hanoi, middle part of January, ready to rock and roll, and all of a sudden you notice all the government offices are starting to close because of Tet. And they're going to stay closed for a long time. Cultural. Okay, let's try another one. Body language varies. You see this with Americans who tend to be very sloppy with their body language, you know, pointing of the foot, patting people on the head, those kinds of things. The body language is very sophisticated, and it varies from country to country. And in our region of the world, they're all different signals. How are you going to learn this? Page 17 for Cambodia out of Kissbow or Shake Hands. I should have brought it with me this morning, but I didn't. Okay? It's there for you. I won't take the time now, but there's plenty that you can learn on the internet. Just understand that's one of the things you have to check off. Okay, let's try another one. Relationships. Is the person you're talking with, this Vietnamese lady, is her brother the government minister in charge of investments in this region for the party? May make a real difference. So who are you really dealing with? Have you done that? Background check kind of thing? So you got to be careful, understand the relationships. And some of the relationships will come out in the discussions. Let's try another one. What do we have else? Entertainment and gifts, we've talked about that. And down at the bottom there, we're going to get to this in this program. Corruption and favors. They're in the negotiation. You may be asked. I'm going to specifically tell you an example that was done to me in Jakarta. Same with the Philippines, only the school was different. David, this deal would go down a lot smoother if you could handle my cousin. She's applying for university, and we think we can get her into Harvard, but just two things here. If you would write a letter of recommendation for my cousin, and then she doesn't really want to live in a dorm, so if your client could handle the provision of an apartment for her, I think things would go a lot smoother. Think about what I just said, and we'll come back to that, okay? That, ladies and gentlemen, is a request for a bribe. Okay? Next. Okay, so conceptually here, the trick is with any international negotiation is you're going to have to do this internally. You want to have a cooperative spirit. And by that, I mean, you know, how can you create a win-win for the other side? And it's a teaching process. What's win-win? And it means if I'm sitting across the negotiating table from you, as an example, while I'm physically located across the table from you, mentally I am not standing or sitting here. I have mentally come around to your side of the table and I'm sitting next to you working cooperatively to see how we can both build our respective businesses. It's an attitude. It's the way that you think. Okay, and these other pieces just on the checklist here, okay? Watch out the bottom one because it's a little tricky on cultural bias because sometimes it's hard to see in your own self or your own business or your own culture. You can see it on the other side, but sometimes it's hard to see for yourself. And there are some specific trainings and techniques that we can teach you on number 5 there at the bottom. Okay, let's try another slide, see what we got here. Okay, now, remember I told you about a warning that something that you as an executive must know because your lawyer may not. You have a deal now, you've negotiated your deal, and you're going to have a contract prepared, right? And imagine now that the contract is for goods or services, but they're going to cross an international border. Whenever you cross an international border, you got to ask yourself, if something goes wrong with that contract, am I really going to be comfortable in the municipal courts in Manila? And your answer is in black there. See it? No, no, or really no. Okay, so here's what you got to make sure in your contract, and you as executives have got to, this is part of your checklist when you meet with your lawyer and you're doing your deal. Make sure they've got something having to do with international dispute resolution. So let's go to the next one. Now, why is this important? Right now, my office is working on a legal problem that involves a judgment that was obtained in a foreign court. Okay, there was a decision made in a foreign court. And so we have to take this judgment and bring it before the federal court here in Honolulu. And it is a mess because unless there is a specific reciprocal treaty enforcement between the United States and that particular country, sometimes you're not going to get that foreign judgment enforced. That means if you do something in a court here in Hawaii or the United States, it may not be enforceable in Thailand or Taiwan or someplace else. So, the umbrella that protects you as business people all over the world is this 1958 New York Convention, which provides for the reciprocal enforcement of arbitration awards. Not a court judgment, an arbitration award. Please understand this. Please make this on your checklist. This falls within the rubric of you idiot, comma. Now, it's not your fault. It would be your lawyer's fault, all right? You need to make sure of this. Now, in our region of the world, the signatory countries include all of the countries that you're going to deal with, but for some selection of the Pacific Island countries, a few of those, North Korea, and I think we've got Laos and Cambodia now, okay? We'll get to North Korea, okay? In due course, due course. All right, let's try another one here. So the other one is you want to build in a process of mediation, okay, in case something goes wrong in your deal. And in different countries, it's how you put the deal together, back together, is different. And this is something where it helps to have a little bit of cultural guidance there. In Japan, as an example, if a deal goes bad, yes, you can have a formal mediation set up, but as a practical matter, the way it's really done is there'll be a invitation for coffee. And it'll be with the executive of your counterpart, you, and perhaps a respected third person. And depending on the age, they may convert from coffee to tea, but expect coffee, okay? and there'll be a discussion and an attempt to mediate this informally. Different countries do it differently, and then there is the formal mediation, but the concept is you have a third person to help put the mess back together again. And they do it different in different countries. Okay, let's try another one here. Now, the contract, here's what you go. You negotiate the various points of the deal. So those are, let's say, 1 through 17. Okay? And then you make sure you're going to lay out in the contract what the language is of not only the contract, but if there should be an arbitration. Come on now, you're doing a deal in Cambodia. Do you really want the arbitration conducted in that language? Or in Vietnam? You want it in Vietnamese? No, you want it in English. So make sure you include that. Choice of law. Whose law is going to apply? Are we going to apply New Zealand law? Makes a difference versus Philippine law. Okay, next. Sometimes you need foreign legal counsel. And in that case, the selection of foreign legal counsel, I would encourage you to be very careful about doing that, because you need to have somebody that can communicate with you effectively and can be effective in that same country. And sometimes when you add those two requirements together, the lawyers that fit in that category are pretty small, very few. Let's try another one. Make sure that your contract has got that arbitration, alternative dispute resolution clause in there, okay? Very important. Next. Okay. And so those clauses can be very simple, or they can lay out specific procedures involved. Let's try another one here. What do we have here? And understand that the beauty of an arbitration proceeding is that it's confidential. Usually they're held in a conference room or a hotel seminar room like we're in right now. And the proceedings do not have a judge. They might have 1 or 3 arbitrators, and far more informal than a court proceeding. Generally speaking, they are much less expensive than in a court proceeding. Okay, next. So here's an example of an arbitration clause that will work. Any controversy or claim arising out of this contract shall be determined by arbitration administered by the American Arbitration Association in accordance with its international arbitration rules. If you have that in your contract, you're good to go. Now, you can make it more elaborate. You can have the arbitration hearings actually take place in Singapore under the American arbitration rules. You could have the arbitration here. Those are various permutations that you can play with your legal counsel. But just as long as you have something like that, okay? Let's try another one here. And here are some other little fine-tuning pieces, okay? Don't select 3 arbitrators unless you've got a big, huge, multi-$100,000 dispute or more, because the cost of having 3 arbitrators will eat up the dispute, okay? Just know that international arbitrators are running at about minimum $500 an hour and up. So 3 of those times 3, and you got to have 2 or 3 days of hearings. You do the math, okay? Next. Designate where you want the hearings to be held. Next. And make sure you designate the language of the arbitration itself. Otherwise, typically you get the language of wherever the arbitration is being held. So if it's being held in Singapore, you're fine. If it's being held in Japan, you have a problem, perhaps, okay, if you don't speak Japanese. Next. Now, this was sent to me yesterday from the Wall Street Journal. It's stated, if you can't read it on the screen there, April 24, 2007. U.S. Attorney General stresses continued FCPA enforcement. What does that mean? Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Okay, what is that? That is a federal law enforced by the Justice Department that imposes criminal fines and jail time for U.S. business people that are found to be bribing foreign government officials. Now, it's foreign government officials, those associated with it, okay, understand that. And there is a saving little exception as a lawyer I will tell you about. So don't buy your orange jumpsuit just yet, okay? Wait. All right, now let's try the next one here. Let's talk about a situation that you go into where you've got pervasive corruption in the society. So at the risk of being chastised, let me tell you that my experience has been that you can find that in a lot of places, but a good example would be in China. Another good example would be in the Philippines. Another good example would be in Jakarta. Another really good example would be Vietnam. And I could go on, but you get the picture. So when you've got a situation where everybody is doing it, and in the words of one of the famous Boston academics, the excuse is it's just part of the culture, what are you going to do? Let me point out that people who say it's part of the culture, to some extent, I think they're hiding behind the culture as a tree. It's an excuse. So let's take the first one here. What's the first thing you're going to do? Let's hit the... Okay, so typically in a negotiation, you might raise this and you'll get this, oh, we have local partners, we'll take care of that for you. Don't you worry about it. You have some problem with customs, we'll handle it for you. Having seen this mistake repeatedly by clients, I will tell you, do not fall into that trap. Why is that? Because the Justice Department will hold you responsible for the acts of your agent. Ooh. You gotta be careful about this. Next. Here's a nice technique. You take the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and use it as a shield. Hold it up. I appreciate what you want to do. This is you talking. But we have this law in the United States that won't permit me to do this. Use it as a shield. All right? And more countries in our region, more and more business people have heard this before. And a lot of times, in my experience, that'll get them to back off on the request for a bribe. Use it as a shield. Next. Oh, here's a cool one. What a sophisticated strategy, David. How'd you think of this all by yourself, or did you have several associates create that? Just say no. Yeah, but I might lose the deal. If I lose the deal, then I don't make any money. Okay, weigh that against what happens to your reputation, your life, and your family if the deal happens to catch the attention of the Justice Department. Look it up on the internet. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. You'll see all kinds of major companies been nailed for this. Next, here's a tricky one. Never say no, but don't say yes. Okay, what is this? This is what we lawyers call the dance of the Gooney birds. Okay, now the dance of the Gooney birds goes like this. I gotta, let me check with our home office and I'll get back to you on that. And yeah, I talked to our CEO and he has a few questions. It goes around and around and around, and certain people are really good at this. And finally, the person who's requested the bribe just kind of gives up and walks away. They're so confused. You got it, but you got to make sure when you're doing the dance of the Gooney birds, you don't say yes at any time. You got to keep dancing. It's kind of fun, actually, because you're right there in the teeth of the dragon. You're dancing around, and it's kind of cool. You pull it off. Then there are other strategies that have been up here on the slide all along, and these are some of the more creative things. In small business, it's kind of hard for you to do. But just to give you some ideas, what's worked specifically that I've done in different situations. One of them, we created an award from some foundation in Switzerland that gives out awards for people that promote environmental such and such. And we gave this to a guy who was requesting a bribe for a water treatment facility in the Philippines. So instead of giving him the bribe, we gave him some kind of award. And the award was like, wow, that is the coolest thing. I am so glad I got this award. It goes on my resume, my LinkedIn profile. I can put it up in my office and everybody can see it and good to go. Another one we did was we named the cafeteria, the employee cafeteria, after the local party chairman. Oh, that was just fantastic. I got all kinds of free news coverage for that one. And we did a park one time, created a park or cleaned up a park in the name of some person, gave him credit for it. And the other one there is an industry pact, and that takes some time to put together, but that's where all the, let's say the exporters of construction materials to a country got together and they kind of locked arms and said, we're not engaging any corruption, and there's a formal agreement amongst them to do that. And when the industry locks down like that, it makes the request for a bribe to any of them bounce off. That's a hard one to put together. It takes time to do that. Just to give you some ideas. Let's go to the next slide here. Now, here's the exception. Make sure you understand the exception because most lawyers don't. You can legally pay a bribe for a small amount of money. Let's say, and I would draw the line at $1,000. If the payment is being made to an official, government official, remember now, this Foreign Corrupt Practices Act only applies to government officials or related organizations. So you got to be careful about this sweep now. If that government official is responsible, that's part of their normal task. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're in a country in the Asia-Pacific region. Let me use Philippines as an example. And you want to have internet service installed. And to have internet service installed, it's like a 10-month wait. But you want to get going right away. And so there is a municipal government official who's responsible for expediting that internet installation. And there is a small loophole in the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that would allow you to pay a very modest bribe, if you will, to that official to get that critical business service installed. But you're getting into a sticky area here, and you've got to make sure that you're just a few $100 is the maximum that you got to pay. It's just in situations where the service is being administered by the actual person getting the bribe. There are some amazing examples of how corruption works in certain places. I can tell you from experience that one of the most difficult ones is actually the customs for certain countries like Vietnam, where the employees all work together to gather bribes and from various entities who are trying to get, let's say their refrigerated crab meat across the dock. And they got a lot of leverage, so they collect all the bribes. And what they do is at the end of the month, they provide a distribution, a dividend to the employees that they've all collected during the month. It's like a monthly bonus. And that concept in Vietnamese is called the Uy Den, the Black Fund. And various government entities have things like this. And so just be aware that you're going to be hit with this, and think about some of the things that we've talked about in this program. So to wind this up, let me just tell you that the concept of this training has been to show you some assets that you can build in the intellectual property area. We went over some of the important considerations and techniques in negotiating a deal. Once you do the negotiations, and you can do a really good job. I know this from experience because coming from Hawaii, you probably don't give yourself credit, but in a given day, you do a little piece of negotiation with a lot of different partial cultures. Right? You have a meeting with somebody that's got 1 foot in a Japanese heritage at 9 o'clock in the morning. You have lunch with a couple people, and one of them is full-on Filipino. They just arrived, a few years ago, and another person is Korean and Thai and Vietnamese, and so we have a lot of you have a lot of practical training. You just are doing it naturally, and there's a lot of cultural skill that you have in working in the region because of the Hawaii culture. And if you'll just apply all those together, you'll get a successful deal, which you can reduce to a contract. In the contract, make sure that you've got that arbitration clause, international dispute resolution, so you're not stuck in a foreign court. And then, throughout all of your business dealings, your first trip, your negotiation, so forth, just keep your eyes open for the whole corruption angle. And I'd encourage you to read and study a little bit more about it. Watch out for this. And if you handle all these things nicely, you'll be in great shape. And I'll be happy to open this up for some questions now. And I hope those of you on the outer islands, you were able to see the PowerPoint and so forth. And so I'd welcome some questions from you too. Let me just caution you with questions, because you're going to get the following answer from me. Don't ask me questions about your specific company and your specific legal situation, because number one, that may be a confidential matter that I cannot and will not do here in public. And secondly, it's inappropriate for me to give legal advice to someone else. So please don't try to use me as your free lawyer here, okay? Because that's just not going to happen. But if you've got questions generally about the topics that we've talked about, I'll be happy to do the best I can to answer them. I can't promise I'll do a good job, but I'll do the best I can. All right? Please, questions, anyone? Okay, yes.
As advisors, when you guys would get questions about the costs of an international trademark, is there approximate, what they face in terms of cost to get that trademark?
Okay, the question has to do with the cost of getting an international trademark. And let me do this in kind of round numbers, okay, for you. But generally speaking, your federal trademark package for the U.S. federal trademark is, with your filing fees and legal fees built into it, let me give you a range. It's between $800 and $1,500, roughly. Now, once you start doing the international side of that trademark registration, just like, as an example, Ivanka Trump just did in China a number of trademarks. Her business did. Each country has add-on filing fees. And so it varies from several $100s, $700, $900, I think, at the top end, to in the low end, something like $200, $300 per country. And then you might have a country like Taiwan that falls outside of that international packaging. And so you have to do an independent trademark application for Taiwan with Taiwan legal counsel, and I'm really not in a position, but that's going to be a few $1,000s there, okay? 2, 3, 4, in that range. To put the final icing on the cake in answering your question, I had a client that did not do a trademark application through the Madrid protocol, which I've talked about, which is how you get this El Cheapo packaging, all right? And so that client, using the Japanese Bengoshi to do the U.S. mark in Japan, spent somewhere between $18,000 to $25,000. Okay?
Randy,
Be careful. Be careful about that. So I just, that particular incident falls under the rubric that I talked about before, you idiot, comma. Okay? All right? You won't do that, so don't worry about it, but I'm just. Okay, question here. Yes?
Yeah. When a company is looking to bring in, say, a product specifically, when is it, or how do they determine when and whether to use a local attorney or a international attorney? As an example, you're trying to get into Japan, for instance. When to use a Japanese attorney to help you execute and coming to the market versus a local Hawaiian attorney, international attorney?
Well, I mean, the question is, when do you shift from your local counsel here in the United States, as an example, to foreign counsel? And the answer to that is there isn't a good answer to that. And the reason is it depends on what the nature of the problem is. And usually the way that our office works is that we look at a given problem and say, is this something that we can, number one, legitimately handle, and two, legally handle? Is this practicing law in Japan? And, we take the problem and say, it really involves Japanese law. This is where you really need a Bengoshi to get in on this. And it's at that point that we turn to the client and say, okay, here are 2 or 3 recommendations that we have. And so we had a recent situation like that in Okinawa, in which we had a client that was looking at some estate planning and real estate situation, which we can't do here at all. And so immediately we found 2 or 3 Bengoshi options, both in or on Okinawa as well as on Kyushu, that could handle that particular problem. And so there isn't, I'm sorry, but there just isn't a formula to tell you when you switch over or when you need. And I think the honest answer is a good, capable international lawyer is going to know the answer. Hey, that's it. You got to have somebody on the other end help us with this. Okay? Sorry, that's just the way it is. Question here, yes.
I have 2 questions. One is the trademark. Is something that I can do by myself, or I should hire a lawyer to take care of that?
Okay, so let's do these questions one at a time. The question for those of you on the outer islands is, on a trademark application, is that something that I can do myself, or should I get a lawyer to do that? And the answer to that is, it's possible for you to do that by yourself. There's a good chance that they might reject it or get involved in all kinds of communications back and forth with you on that. And so at the risk of, my office doesn't need any more business. But I think that on a trademark application, it's much better if you have experienced legal counsel to help you with that. A copyright, I think, generally speaking, you could do that yourself on a copyright. Sometimes people use lawyers for those as well. Okay? They can be a little bit complicated, and especially if there's some questions that come back, or that's something that's really critical that you got to have copyrighted and you can't afford to have a mistake made. It's better to have counsel involved in that, because you don't want to have it rejected and then somebody else grabbed that trademark or that copyright. You understand what I'm saying? And then they copyright it, and then they own it. You understand what I'm saying? You have to be careful about that. Because then you get in a legal fight, well, I created it, yeah, but I registered, you don't want that. Okay? Second question?
Yeah, after go through with all the exporting, it seemed like, I think should we open separate company to just do export? It's different with the company that we do business in Hawaii.
The question is it necessary to open a second company to do the exporting as opposed to using the same one that you have that you're already in business? As I recall, your business is involved in ladies' fashion.
Yes.
Is that right? Is that a question ever understood by everybody? The only reason for opening a separate company, in my mind, is if there are some liability questions that you don't want to expose your existing company to. In other words, there's some kind of danger involved, and it's hard for me to say. Generally speaking, the answer to your question is no. It's not necessary to open a separate company. Okay?
But if any legal, international legal taking risk will be hurting the main company, even if they're in US, is that right?
It could. And it's so in that situation, I would need to know you're probably asking me for some free legal advice here, and I can't get into this unless I know more of the background of your specific company, what you're talking about. But I would say, generally speaking, it's not necessary to open a separate company, but you may have risk or liability problems with the international side of your business that you want to keep them separate. You see what I'm saying? And that's where a good legal counsel can help you if you're really going to need to do that. All right?
Hi. I have two questions. The first one is, have you heard of the UN, United Nations? They do some sort of copyright patent registration that you can just do it once and then it will populate to other countries?
Yes. You're referring to what I talked about earlier as the Berne Convention that's tied into the United Nations. So yes. Yeah.
And is it a good way, is it good to go through that route so that you'll just cover the whole?
Actually, the answer is yes, but I forgot to tell you folks on the Outer Islands what the question is. The question is it good to go through the Berne Convention route for copyright, international copyright coverage, right? That's your question? Okay, so the answer is yes, but you don't have to do anything about it. The beauty of the copyright registration is that the way that they set up this Berne Convention is if you do a federal registration in Washington with your copyright, then the international coverage under the Berne Convention is automatic. It's automatic as to those countries that signed on, and there are a lot of them. So it's relatively slick and easy to get an international coverage. This is different than a trademark registration, which is going to require you to pick and choose and pay additional fees and so forth. Okay? Good question.
Thank you. The second question I have is, after running a small business for 15 years, and I look back, I was like, I should have done that right from the very beginning, get an accountant, set up the right tax structure, get a financial planner to include estate planning in there, get an attorney for business law and structure, and then get a business advisor. So if, say, I'm going to go to the export route, is there a similar formula that I should use from the get-go, like just so that I don't have to patch the problems later?
Okay, you're going to have to help me because I've got to repeat this question, okay, for our folks on the Outer Islands and that maybe didn't pick up your voice, okay? It's a great question, by the way. So let me try, okay? And you have to correct me, okay? So I'm just, that was a long question, okay? So the question was that this executive has already had 15 some odd years in operating a successful business, and she has found, with the benefit of that experience, the need to have tax accountants, lawyers, estate planning, what else?
And business advisor
Business advisor, and wish she had had that
from the beginning.
from the very beginning. And the question is there a similar formula for exporting or doing international business? Do I have that right?
Yes.
Great, okay. You owe me a cup of coffee after we get through with this to make sure I got that right, okay? All right, so the answer is yes. And the formula is same, but different. Meaning, you just want to have that same list of advisors, whether they be accountants, lawyers, so forth, who have experience and knowledge in international business and exporting. And in fact, honestly, I think it's even more important. And the reason is there are some additional snake pits that you can step into doing international business that you wouldn't encounter locally here. Okay? Great questions, by the way. Yeah. Anybody else in the room here? Or how about online? Any of you folks out there on the outer islands, you got?
There was one question that came in that pretty much mirrored Randy's question about when would you hire a
Okay.
local attorney in another country.
Okay.
So I think you answered that correctly. There was a kind of a vague question about costs, which I know is difficult to answer, but what do legal activities cost? You know, I think it's a difficult question to answer because it really depends.
Yeah, and I think on the cost situation, the way to handle that is to sit down with a capable lawyer that you think has got some expertise in the area after you've done some due diligence online and so forth, or you know by way of reputation or talking with people, and lay out what you think needs to be done and get an estimate. And I can tell you that the legal fees do not come cheap, so don't expect that to be a setting up a business and all those kinds of things. It can be very expensive. The flip side of it is it can be even whopping more expensive if you do not do it. So do it right, and you'll actually find that a good legal counsel can help you develop new business that maybe you hadn't even thought of, and help you build your company to take it to a different level. You know, if you do this, if you apply over here for this grant, if you do this, you get this training in here, because it's just a matter of seeing what's there and where the holes are, and good advisors can really help you with that. And it's a fact of doing business in the United States and very helpful internationally. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one last question. Sounds like you have a lot of experience working in international law in various countries, and if you were to rank order the top 4 countries that you find would have the path of least resistance of coming into a market in the country, what would that be? What would that look like?
Least resistance.
Easier to do business in or enter the market.
Okay, that's easy. Number 1, Canada. Ah, thought it was going to be some other country. Number 2, Australia. Oh, God. Number 3, New Zealand. And number 4, Well, in our region, I think we're limited to our region. For those of you, we're going through this ridiculous exercise here of what are the top 4 countries ease of doing business, and in the Asia-Pacific region, okay? So ranked out, I would say ease of doing business is, in this order, is Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and then the fourth place, in my experience, would be Singapore. And now, you know, there are some Hong Kong possibilities to sword fight on that for that 4th position there, but I personally would pick Singapore. And then there is actually a gap once you get in our Asia Pacific region, unless I've forgotten someone, there is a gap before you hit some of these other countries like Japan and Philippines, South Korea, Indonesia, so forth, and China. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question regarding like international trademark disputes. Like, say you have a company in the U.S. and you know, like a tourist comes and they like your product and they notice that your trademark is not taken in their country, and then later on you want to do business in that country, but you find that someone is already taking your trademark name. So what kind of options do you, as a business owner here, have to like either do business in that country?
Well, okay, so the question is, let's say you have an international trademark, you set up here in the United States, you're doing business here, and you've had some contact with a company in another country, they like your product, they start doing business, and they register your mark in their country. What are your options? And so you are really not going to like the answer I'm going to give you, okay, but I'm going to give it to you honestly. Look up Apple in China trademarks. And what you're going to find is tough luck. And you'll see that the Chinese court stripped Apple of, and I don't recall whether it was the Apple, use of the Apple symbol or the iPhone piece. Elizabeth, do you know what it was?
It was use of the iPhone piece because the Chinese registration for trademarks works a little differently, and they're not very good about enforcing trademark law.
Okay, so for those of you online who did not hear, it was the iPhone.
iPhone name.
The word iPhone.
iPhone as registered for leather goods and other products. Apple registered it for consumer electronics, but not for leather goods and handbags.
Okay. Apple registered the name iPhone for electronics, but not consumer products like leather handbags, and they lost it in China. There are other examples of this, but the iPhone one is a big one that was fairly recent here. So here's the answer to this. You get your federal trademark registration, and this is the cheapest way to do it too. At the same time you do the federal trademark registration, under the Madrid Protocol, you tick off the countries that's not a good term, is it, tick off? You select the correct countries that you anticipate doing business in, all right? And then, of course, there are separate filing fees and so forth. And then you do that whole package at generally at one time, and it requires you as a business owner to anticipate, okay, what are my key target markets? And then you're doing your international trademark registrations in advance of actually getting into that country, so it's protected. And I had a client out of one of the earlier export university seminars here, and they had a situation exactly like you described, and their potential partner was from South Korea. And the potential partner went ahead and registered everything. And they had the trademark and some copyright stuff all done in South Korea. And they were doing business together. And one of the things that we had to do was to work out, as a part of the business deal, the surrender of the intellectual property back to the Hawaii company. And it was, we were able to successfully negotiate it and do it, but it was just, honestly, it was just luck. They didn't have to do it. and we were able to do it, and everything worked out fine. But don't count on that, please. Okay, sir.
So talking generalities, so if you had a commodity like chocolates or coffee,
Okay.
do you have to trademark or would you recommend doing that? So example like your Kona coffee versus just exporting coffee. If you get the same price for it on your end, the business end, do you have to do it? Or would you suggest
Well, okay.
it's just a item like, and it's in its form that it was from on the farm?
Okay, you got to help me because we have the folks on the outer islands. I want to make sure they're plugged in with this question because there may well. Do we have somebody in the coffee business on this webinar? Do you know? No? Okay. So the question is, do you have to trademark? And let's suppose that you have a commodity like coffee or chocolate, and it's in the same form. Let's pretend it's in the same bag, okay? And can we use a brown paper wrapper bag? Okay, is that okay? Brown paper wrapper bag, and it has no identifying mark or anything on it. Do you have to do a trademark? No. You can do that. You can ship the coffee, you can sell it, you can make the money. Here's what you missed. You missed the whole concept of Wally Amos.
You're branding.
You're branding it. And okay. Now here's the thing. Yes, the product is the same, but the design that's, say, on the bag, you just have to realize that you're building independent value separate from the bag or the coffee that's in the bag or the chocolate that's in the bag. And so that trademark, as it's built up, then has independent value if you should ever want to sell it. It's sort of like creating a secret bank account. And that's exactly what I want you to understand. That's exactly the business strategy that, because Wally Amos, participated in some of my programs. I know this. That's exactly the strategy. The bag was the cookies, chocolate chip, raisin, whatever, oatmeal. But it was the trademark and the trade name that he built up into value that sold off to, and I guess one of them was Nabisco. They bought that, and then he creates another one and builds it up. And so it's an opportunity for you to build a separate asset in addition to the bags of chocolate or coffee or whatever. You see that? You do not have to. No. Think of it, here's the way to think of it. Think of this as a free condominium tower that you get to build without having to pay for all the construction, concrete, labor, and so forth. You do have the filing fees at the beginning to set it off, and there's some things you have to do to keep it alive over the course of the years. But why not? Great question, by the way. Even though it was very general, great question. Are we wound up here? There are more refreshments, I think, in the back. And for those of you that are online, I hope this was helpful. I hope you could see and hear and understand the great questions that we had from the audience. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And we'll see each other again sometime soon. Thank you so much, and go enjoy the rest of your Thursday here.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to end this presentation and end the webinar section. And if you do have a minute and you'd like to talk to David, please meet back there. Finish up some of the coffee and pastries that are back there. But thank you very much for attending. Look again online for our upcoming schedule. We've just rescheduled the Tokyo International Gift Show meeting for June 28th. I think that'll be really, really interesting. We're going to go over such topics as booth etiquette and simple cultural issues, as well as just general business topics for the Tokyo International Gift Show. But we have other things coming up, a Canada-specific seminar, Taiwan-specific seminar, so please register for those. Thank you very much, everyone.